So the Orks in Dawn of War 4 will be one of 4 fully fledged factions. Try saying that 10 times, but what we do know is that the Orks in Warhammer 40k aren't just another alien race. They are essentially living weapons. They exist for war. They don't fight because they have to, they fight because they find it fun. Bigger guns, louder explosions, more Dakka, and if it looks dangerous, they probably love it. So today, we are breaking down the Orks in Dawn of War 4, we will take a look at every major unit that we've seen so far, and how they are likely going to play on the battlefield, and what they are known for best. So let's start where every Ork army begins, with the Boyz. These are essentially your basic Ork warriors, and well, basic for an Ork still means massive, brutal, and stronger than most humans. In fact, these guys live for fighting. To them, battle isn't grim or tragic, it is entertainment. Now Ork boys are incredibly flexible because they come in tons of variations, usually defined by what weapons they carry or how they get into the fight. And from what we've seen so far in the trailers and the gameplay footage, we are getting some of the most iconic ones. The first are Snagger. These are the classic frontline brawlers. They carry a slugger, which is basically a crude Ork pistol that fires big chunks of metal, and a chopper, which is an axe-like blade built for one thing, smashing and slicing things apart. Their armor is, well, generous to even call armor. A shoulder plate here, a back plate there, all mismatched, badly maintained, and barely held together, but to an Ork, that is more than enough. Slugger boys don't care about cover, formations or tactics, they just sprint straight at the enemy. They fire a few wild shots at point blank range and then dive headfirst into a full brawl. If a fight is happening right in your face, chances are it's a mob of Slugger boys having the best day of their lives. And then you've got the Shoota boys, the Orks who prefer the shooty side of things. These guys are all about ranged combat and maximum Dakka. Their weapon of choice is, well, the Shoota, a chunky automatic rifle that fires big, brutal rounds. It is loud, it kicks like a squig, and it's about as accurate as you'd expect, which is exactly how the Orks like it. They aren't trying to be sharpshooters, they just want to spread as much lead as possible and enjoy the noise. There's even an Ork belief behind it. If a gun isn't loud, it probably isn't doing much damage. So louder usually equals better. On the battlefield, Shoota boys usually come in mobs, often led by a knob, to keep them in line. Well, in line by Ork standards at least. And for every few boys, one of them might be carrying something heavier, like a big shooter or a rocket launcher. So you get waves of bullets, smoke, explosions, and total chaos. Maximum Dakka, minimum accuracy, but zero regrets. Now above the boys are the knobs. These are the big bosses right below the warboss. A knob isn't just a boy who got lucky though, he's bigger, meaner, and he survived enough fights to earn fear and respect from the others. They are the rough and ready sergeants, leading mobs of boys and smashing anyone who challenges them. Knobs don't really give orders so much as they demonstrate authority by wrecking things and reminding everyone who is in charge. They are usually armed better and armored heavier than normal boys, and it looks like they will be add-ons for existing squads. Which by the way brings us to Meganobz. When a regular knob decides he isn't big, loud or deadly enough, he straps himself into a massive suit of mega armor. Meganobz are walking tanks, covered head to toe in thick scrap plating, bolted on guns, and brutally oversized weapons. Most of them carry power claws, kill saws, or giant crushing fists, often with built-in guns for extra Dakka. On the battlefield, Meganobz usually push straight up the middle or act as bodyguards for Warbosses. If you see massive armored Orks lumbering toward you with powerful claws snapping, something on your side is about to stop existing. And then we've got one of the flashiest units in any Ork army, the Flash Gitz. These are the elite knobs who care about two things above all else: big guns and looking impressive while using them. Instead of charging headfirst into melee, Flash Gitz hang back and unload absurd amounts of firepower with their custom weapons called Snaz guns. These guns are massive, over-engineered, and designed to drown enemies in Dakka. But it's not just about shooting. Flash Gitz are about style. They wear the loudest, most over-the-top armor that they can get, covered in trophies, bionics, and orky tech. Everything about them screams, "I'm richer, shootier, and better than you." Because of that attitude, they often end up becoming freebooter mercenaries, selling their firepower to whoever promises the biggest fight. They are still nobs at heart though, huge, tough, and perfectly capable of smashing faces if anyone gets too close. Next up is the Beast Snagger tribes, one of the wildest orc subcultures out there. These orcs live for the hunt. Instead of just fighting armies, they go after massive beasts, monsters, and even enemy war machines, dragging them down with brute force and crude weapons. Their whole culture is essentially about proving who's the meanest greenskin by killing the biggest prey. Now, the foot soldiers of these tribes are the Beast Snagger boys. They are bigger and tougher than regular boys, shaped by a lifetime of hunting dangerous creatures. They can use sluggers, choppers, thump guns, and brutal melee weapons, and they are absolutely savage in close combat. And we do see the Beast Snagger boys in the trailers, especially ones carrying thump guns. These are basically large bore orc handheld cannons that fire huge explosive shells. Now, a good way to spot someone from the Beast Snagger tribe is that they are often wearing a pelt. And you know what? We even see one of the Warbosses, Guzcutta, wearing one too. And that is for good reason, because he is from the Beast Snagger tribe. The other Warboss, Gorgutz, is from the Bad Moons clan, but we will talk about these Warbosses later on in the video. And then you've got the Squig Hog Boys, the mounted maniacs. These orcs ride massive boar-like beasts called Squig Hogs straight into battle. They charge in like living battering rams, smashing it into infantry, light vehicles, and well, anything else unlucky enough to be in the way. And because this is orcs we're talking about, they use squig bombs too. Yes, living explosives. A squig bomb is exactly what it sounds like. A squig packed full of explosives and pointed at the enemy. Sometimes it gets shot, sometimes it bites the wrong thing, sometimes it explodes too early, but when it works, it causes absolute chaos. Infantry get shredded, vehicles get blown apart, and the orcs laugh the whole time. I'm pretty excited to see this unit in Dawn of War 4. It could make for some very exciting plays, especially in multiplayer. So essentially, if you see a tiny angry squig sprinting across the battlefield with metal strapped onto it, congratulations, you're about to experience orc engineering at its finest. Still with the Beast Snaggers, we've got the Warbosses. Warbosses are psychic shamans of the Beast Snagger tribe. Unlike the regular weird boys who absorb energy until they almost explode, Warbosses act more like spiritual guides. They channel the primal power of Gork and Mork to confuse enemies, boost their allies, and make the entire mob even more dangerous. Imagine a feral orc chanting, gesturing, and crackling with green energy, while the boys around him become even more violent than usual. That is a Warboss, and we do in fact see him in the trailer. It's short, but he's definitely there. Now, for the orcs who decided running into battle just wasn't fast enough, Stormboyz are the orc jump troops. They strap rocket packs onto their backs and launch themselves straight over the battlefield. Loud, smoky, barely controlled, and extremely orky. But what makes the Stormboyz hilarious is their mindset. They are weirdly obsessed with discipline. They march in formation, follow orders, and try to act like proper soldiers, right up until they ignite their jetpacks and rocket headfirst into the enemy. They specialize in rapid assaults, as you can imagine, jumping over defenses and slamming into vulnerable targets. They are usually armed like regular boys, but the real weapon is that sudden, violent impact from above. Of course, rockets misfire, packs explode, some Stormboyz overshoot and vanish in a fireball, but that is just part of the fun. Of course, I'm sure they'll have 100% accuracy though in a real-time strategy game, they'll certainly still be very fun to play, I'm sure. Now, Mekboyz are the engineers of the Orc society, in the loosest, most dangerous sense of the word. They instinctively know how to build guns, vehicles, walkers. They don't use blueprints, they just bolt stuff together until it mostly works, and then make it louder. Now, mech guns, on the other hand, well, these are massive artillery pieces made from scrap and stolen tech. Crewed by terrific Gretchen, they are inaccurate, unstable, and insanely destructive. What kind of destruction, though, of course, is going to depend on what type of mech guns it is. In what seems to be a recurrent theme of customization in Dawn of War 4, we see at least two types of mech guns. This one looks a lot like a smasher gun, and this one looks a lot like a custom mega cannon. And then we've got the Deff Dreads, walking piles of scrap piloted by orcs bolted directly into the machine, covered in claws, saws, and guns. They stomp straight into enemy lines, smashing everything in reach. But they are not just brute force melee monsters, many of them also mount big shooters, flamers, letting them blast targets apart before stomping in to finish the job. And this is where Dawn of War 4 seems to continue the series' tradition of awesome customization. Traditionally, the Deff Dread has 5 main weapon options: the Big Shooter, Dread Claw, Custom Mega Blaster, Rocket Launcher, and Scorcher. In what we've seen so far in Dawn of War 4, all of these appear to be present, except, interestingly, the Custom Mega Blaster. What really stands out, though, is how the weapon layouts are being shown. In every appearance of the Deff Dread, it either has 4 Dread Claws or Saws, or 2 Claws and Saws on the upper arms, with 2 different weapons mounted on the lower arms. For example, we've seen versions with 2 Scorchers, others with 4 Claws or Saws, some with 2 Big Shooters, and even builds with twin rocket launchers. But across all of them, one thing stays consistent: there are always at least 2 Claws or Saws on the upper arms. That's led to a really solid theory from my helpful helper, Norseland, and I am inclined to agree with him. The idea is that the Deff Dread likely starts with 4 Claws or Saws as a base loadout, and then you can customize it by replacing both of the lower arms with a chosen weapons set. It's a simple system, but one that fits perfectly with Orc design philosophy: brutal, flexible, and all about strapping on more guns. And above even that is the Gorkanaut, a walking fortress, a towering war machine, bristling with guns, designed to be the center of the battlefield. Built by Mekboyz, who decided bigger is better still wasn't enough, this marvelous machinery tries to dominate everything around it. Unlike smaller walkers, the Gorkanaut is absolutely loaded with weapons. From what we can see in Dawn of War 4, it's packing some truly orky hardware. A Deathstorm Mega Shooter for ridiculous sustained fire, the brutal Claw of Gork for close-ranged combat, rocket launchers, Scorchers, and twin Big Shooters for even more Dakka. It's the kind of loadout that doesn't just win fights, it erases whole sections of the battlefield. And if anything somehow survives the shooting, no problem, the Gorkanaut is more than happy to stomp forward and tear things apart in melee, crushing enemies under their massive claws and metal limbs. Now, for air support, Orks bring the Deff Copters. Scrap-built flying machines, I imagine that they'll zoom across the battlefield, harassing flanks, hunting isolated targets, and firing big shooters or rockets. Now, we do see them in the trailer, but very briefly. It looks like they'll be fast, loud, but maybe not built to last, but that's fine. Their job is to cause chaos for as long as they are still in the air. Now, at the very bottom of the Orc food chain are the Gretchen, or Grots for short. They are smaller, weaker, and mostly bullied. They can crew mech guns, carry ammo, fix things under fire, and sometimes get sent forward as bait. They are not great fighters, but they can be cheap, numerous, and surprisingly useful. They are pretty much the grease in the Orc war machine, miserable and essential. There's a good chance that they'll turn up in towers and behind cover to help with the war efforts, especially on top of the Orc buildings that typically spawn with a gun or two. Now going from the bottom to the top, we have got the Battle Wagon. This is the Orks' answer to the question, what if a tank, a transport and a battering ram were all the same thing? It's a massive rolling slab of scrap, armor plates and guns, built not just to carry orcs into battle, but to smash its way there. Now traditionally the Battle Wagon's biggest role is as a transport, hauling mobs of boys straight into the thick of fight, while shrugging off incoming fire and blasting away with whatever weapons the Mekboyz have bolted on. Big shooters, cannons, rockets. It's a moving gun platform that turns every advance into a wall of noise and destruction. But in Dawn of War 4, that role might be somewhat changing. The developers have already mentioned there will be a relative lacking of traditional transport units in the game, which makes it unlikely that the Battle Wagon will function as a proper troop carrier. Instead, it looks like the Battle Wagon is being leaned into more of a frontline combat vehicle. Now we will be talking about the commanders for the Orks, but before we do, I would like to say a very big thank you for everyone supporting the channel. If you've been enjoying the videos, maybe you've watched one or two of them, make sure that you are subscribed, because we will be having plenty of more Dawn of War 4 content coming up in the near future. It's time to talk about the big bosses. We gotta start off with one and only Gorgutz, because he's not just another war boss, he's a straight up legend. If you've played the old Dawn of War games, you already know him, loud, brutal, and somehow always turning up again even bigger and angrier than last time. Like any proper war boss, Gorgutz is huge, heavily armed and obsessed with picking fights with the biggest thing that he can find. He's not interested in subtle plans, politics, or long-term strategy. His entire way of war is simple: hit it hard, yell a lot, and if it's still moving, hit it again. And if someone beats him once, he doesn't mope about it, he comes back later with more boys, more guns, and way more attitude. What really makes Gorgutz stand out though is the sheer vibe he brings. Orcs follow him not because he's clever, but because he's tough, loud, and terrifyingly confident. Every time he charges back onto the battlefield, he's got new scars, bigger gear, and an even stronger need to prove he's the meanest thing in the sector. Now, story-wise, Gorgutz isn't fighting for conquest or some sort of grand goal, he fights because he loves the fight. To him, the galaxy is just one big arena, and every enemy is another chance to see how killy he can get. If there's a war happening anywhere, you can bet Gorgutz wants in, preferably right at the front. So when you hear an orc bellowing about how he's going to crump everything, while leading a tidal wave of boys straight into the thickest part of the battle, yep, that's probably Gorgutz Ed Hunter. Not just a war boss, but the walking, shouting definition of what it means to be an orc. And while we are talking about legendary orcs, we've also got to mention Guzcutta, because he is of course another war boss in Dawn of War 4 who perfectly sums up the orc mindset. Bigger, louder and more violent than everyone around him. He's not famous because he's tactical, he's famous because he's ridiculously killy. The kind of boss who doesn't just lead from the front, he is the front. Now Guzcutta built his reputation the orc way, by beating bigger orcs, surviving fights that he probably shouldn't have, and taking whatever gear he wanted off anyone unlucky enough to lose to him. Every win makes him tougher, meaner and more confident, and that naturally pulls more boys to his banner. To orcs, that's the only proof that matters. Now what's important to note at this point though really is that in Dawn of War 4 there is obviously going to be a full campaign for the orcs, and a big part of it looks to be an initial fight between Guzcutta and Gorgutz, because of course there is only one planet of Cronus, and it looks like both of these guys don't want to share it. We see it on the trailer, both of these guys going head on. What's pretty cool between these two war bosses though is I think we could choose between either of them to complete the campaign with. And so the obvious question is for you guys, which war boss are you going to be choosing? I'm pretty sure I know what you guys are going to go for, but you gotta type a 1 in the comments if you're going for Guzcutta, a 2 if you're going for Gorgutz. Now there are some extra bits of information as well worth mentioning about the orcs in Dawn of War 4 that we spot from the trailers. Don't forget we do of course have the War banner. I'm not entirely sure how that will play into the game, maybe it gives a boost to the units. And don't forget as well, we do have 2 abilities, and I think one of them is probably actually activating the War banner itself. we do have something called the Scrap Heap. I'm not entirely sure what that is, to be honest. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments section below. So yep, it looks like the Orks in Dawn of War 4 are shaping up to be exactly what we'd hoped for. Massive mobs, ridiculous machines, living bombs, flying death traps, and Warbosses who exist purely to crump everything in sight. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Orks in Dawn of War 4, at least what we know about it so far. I'm sure there's plenty more coming in the way of information on the horizon, but until then, if you'd like to learn about the Adeptus Mechanicus, and it is the first time they are officially being played in a real-time strategy game, click on the end card screen right now, where you can find out all about them. Either way, take care, and see you next time.